Welcome everyone, StealthyShiroean here, and today I'm bringing you my review of the Humble Choice bundle for December 2022. The last bundle of the year, and Humble ends it with, well, it's kind of a fizzle if I'm being honest. Let me know what you think of this month's bundle in the comments below. Be sure to check the timestamps for specific games, and stay tuned for my final thoughts in the end. Okay, let's get to the review. Starting us off is Super Magbot, which was very painful for me to play through. This game is a fairly fast-paced precision platformer where one wrong move results in death and a restart of the level. Luckily, the levels are short and snappy, so if you die, it's not like you lose a lot of progress, but you might have to start over again and again. Clearly there is inspiration here from something like Super Meat Boy, so if you played that, then you know what you're getting into. However, in Super Magbot, timing and precision also plays a role in the magnetic feature. Players can't jump in this game and instead use magnets to propel themselves to different platforms. Using repulsion and attraction, players have to be precise in their movement, but also where they're aiming the magnets. And when many of the reactions have to be quick, that could be a tall order, at least for someone like me who sucks at these kinds of games. I can't say I really enjoyed my time here. I had to try and turn my brain off to null the pain in order to get through some sections. It didn't help that I stupidly forgot to record the first time around, so I needed to play through things again to capture footage for the video. Although I will say it was easier in the second go of it, so maybe I acquired some skill. All that said though, is Super Magbot a bad game? No, I don't think so. Although I have very little to compare it to, but everything felt good here. Anytime I died, I always felt like it was my own error rather than the game being unfair or being difficult for the sake of difficulty. I could see why someone would enjoy this game, but I know I won't be returning to it myself. Following up is a roguelike game by the name of Blade Assault. It's a 2D platformer with fast-paced action combat. The story here revolves around some sort of revenge plot and a rebel group trying to overthrow something. Corporation, if I were to guess, from the cyberpunk setting. Ultimately, the story is bare bones and forgettable, but at least gameplay is solid. As I first started playing, I can't say I was super engaged with it. Everything seemed like I've been here and done this without any real standout charm. But as I continued to play, it kinda grew on me. I had fun dashing around and using the different weapon skills the character has. There are other playable characters to unlock that I'm sure all offer something different to the mix if you're willing to play the game long enough to unlock them. Out of any of the roguelites I played in recent memory, I can't really say that Blade Assault is better or worse than any of them though. It was just an okay game that I think I could get some enjoyment out of if I were to continue playing. Although, as I've been reviewing these bundles and getting to experience a good amount of the roguelite genre, I think I'm beginning to understand that I really don't care for it. I think the constant retreading of old ground and always having to build your character back up with only incremental upgrades doesn't appeal to me that much. So I'd give this one a go if you're into these sort of games or haven't played your fill of roguelites yet. But it's another one that will probably sit untouched and forgotten on my virtual shelf. The next game is an unusual one with an interesting premise. Where the Water Tastes Like Wine is a game that is set in America during the 1930s Great Depression. You play the role of a wanderer traveling around the country in search of stories. These stories are then told to other travelers and can change as the game goes on. The ultimate objective wasn't exactly clear as to what you needed to do other than pair the right stories together to create something that people want to listen to. Eventually, the stories become retold with new elements that make them more exciting. As mentioned, you meet other characters that reveal more about their lives, and supposedly you could use their tellings as stories told to others. The idea behind the game is definitely unique, and it's a setting hardly ever used in popular media. Presentation-wise, the art and music was great and really set the theme of the game. However, for me, the gameplay felt like something that sounded great on paper, but in execution I wasn't really into it. I didn't really like coming across all these disparate bits of exposition. It felt disjointed and pointless, and I felt bored if I'm being completely honest. At the same time though, I know that I'm only in the beginning stretch of the game, and these stories are supposed to evolve as you play. I think that feature alone is the only reason I would come back to this and give it another try. Similar to the previous title, TOEM takes a player on a journey across the land. You'll meet odd characters along the way in this one as well, but will be helping them with their various tasks. and more importantly, cataloging your journey across the way with photography. This was a charming game that has a real wholesome and innocent feel to it. There's something great about running around taking pictures of things. Although I might be a bit biased because I just got done playing Alba, a wildlife adventure with my daughter, which has you essentially doing the same thing. One side of TOEM's gameplay has you taking pictures of things to fill your compendium and just taking pictures of anything you find interesting. Eventually, players receive a tripod and the ability to apply filters and borders to take even more interesting and humorous photos. The other side of TOEM is the light puzzle solving the game throws at the player so they can collect stamps for a free bus ride to continue their journey. This can involve searching for things with the camera or taking pictures of various defined objects to complete the goals. I really enjoyed my time here with it, even if it was very simplistic. It seems like the perfect game I'll play with my daughter at some point in the future, as it's very kid-friendly. Although if you're looking for a nice chill game, then it's good for that as well. Backbone is a 2D noir detective game featuring beautiful stunning pixel art and anthropomorphic animals. It reminded me a bit of Chicken Police, which we received earlier in the year and had a similar premise. If we're just talking about presentation, then I'm a sucker for good pixel art direction, and Backbone wins out in that. However, story-wise, I felt Chicken Police did it better, especially with its excellent voice acting. However, Backbone did a good job of taking a relatively mundane case, finding a cheating husband, and turning it into something a lot larger than what it originally appeared to be. I felt compelled to keep playing and get to the bottom of things, even if I wasn't really getting to the bottom of anything. Despite being a detective story, it didn't seem like there was that much detective work involved on the player's end. The writing here within the dialogue is definitely something that could be improved. Some of the humor seems very juvenile, and I felt the writers used a ton of cursing for the sake of sounding edgy, but maybe that's just me. Also, it's worth noting that others in Steam reviews mentioned that the latter parts of the story take a huge turn for the weird, which seems to be a 180 flip of the script that is rather unexpected. So the initial hour or two might not really be indicative of the entire experience. That aside, it still won me over enough to want to complete it at some point, even if the writing did falter at points. Wow, okay, it's been a while since we were given a game that is all but dead. First Class Trouble is a social deduction game similar to Among Us but with 3D visuals. There are some changes as well, like the ability to fight back against the imposters, but essentially it felt like the same game, at least from my limited experience with both. But it's also one of those games that asks you to get together with 5 other people and actually talk to them. If you have friends, then great, I'm sure this will be a fun experience. Gameplay and visuals all seem solid, and I didn't think there were any glaring problems with my hour. But I don't have 5 friends, let alone friends who own and would want to play this game. To me, this game feels like the devs had an idea from the Among Us popularity and tried to ride that wave too little too late. The Steam charts show a daily average of less than 150 people. The first few matches I tried to get into were just us fooling around in the lobby because people didn't stay in long enough for a match to actually start. I will say that matches did eventually start regularly, but I wouldn't bank on that being a thing at all hours. I specifically tried to play during a time that I knew would have players online. Another thing I have to point out that really irked me is there's no tutorial unless you count the text that you could read in-game. I would have liked to have seen an actual tutorial, even if it was just snippets of gameplay, to get an understanding of what it was I needed to do. Either that, or the game needs to be intuitive enough to live on its own without any player onboarding. I hate feeling like I need to watch a video in order to get a handle on things. Which I didn't do, by the way. Anyway, ran over. Essentially, this is just a throwaway title given as a last-ditch effort to revitalize a game that is clearly long since flatlined. If you have the friends and they all happen to have the game, then give it a go. In the first of the 2 big RPGs in this bundle, we have Greedfall. This RPG takes inspiration from colonial-era history. The story takes the main character to a remote island in the New World filled with resources, indigenous people, and the promise that they could find what they need to cure a horrible illness that is plaguing the land. World building seems to be a strong point for this title, but I can't really say how well it all plays out, given that I only put an hour into it. I didn't even make it as far as the island. From what I could tell, the writing did seem to be decent. I was pleased that the one quest I completed had layers of morally gray options that were kinda difficult to decide as to what I should choose. Furthermore, these options suggested that there would be benefits and consequences depending on whatever I chose with different factions, which seemed to play a big role. If these elements of role-playing and choice continue throughout the entirety of the game, then I think I'd be quite pleased with it. Visually, I thought the game looked great, but the characters did feel a bit stiff at times, especially in cutscenes. Also, some of the interiors seemed devoid of clutter objects, which made them feel empty and unrealistic. Although, going in, I knew this was a AA budget game, so I expected some of those kinds of things. Greedfall is the one game in the bundle that I'd been wanting to play for a while now. I love colonial stuff, and I'm really looking forward to getting back to this and exploring more of what it has to offer. And capping off the bundle, we have Wasteland 3, the third game, obviously, in a post-apocalyptic CRPG series. Seeing the number 3 in the title, I was immediately skeptical that this story would be harder to follow since I haven't played the previous one, and definitely did not play the 1988 original. However, I didn't really get that feeling at all. Everything was summed up rather succinctly in the opening intro cinematic, and the rest of the pieces started falling in place as I continued playing. As opposed to Atom RPG Trudograd, which dumped exposition on my lap left and right, confusing the heck out of me, Wasteland 3 cuts to the chase and gets right down to business. Players are immediately presented with a tense situation and a tutorial that covers the basics. Combat takes place in turns on a square grid with each character having a set number of action points to spend. Very similar to something like XCOM, characters will need to find cover, flank, and pray to the RNG gods that the 95% chance to hit is actually 95%. It's fun, but things felt too early to know what uniqueness it brings to the table, if any. There are also some dialogue exchanges in the first section with different options depending on your skills. All in all, I thought it was a good start to get someone invested into the game and show what it's all about without dragging it down with information that very few players would fully understand. All the dialogue here has excellent voice acting, and some cinematic dialogue scenes help to alleviate info overload and keep things entertaining when you do have exposition dumps. I thought this was a good first impression. I still need to get to Wasteland 2 though, but one day I'll come back to this. Okay, let's wrap this up and see if this bundle is worth it or not. I based my rating solely on whether I thought the game was worth playing on about an hour or so of hands-on gameplay. Overall, this month was definitely weaker than I think any month this year. The two RPGs do a lot to come in clutch and save it, but I think even those would fill a somewhat niche audience, one being a somewhat janky AA game, and the other being a turn-based CRPG. Outside of the RPGs, many of the games felt okay. Basically, not the end-of-the-year bundle I think many of us would have liked. That being said, I imagine it's because Humble wants to save their showstopper for January's bundle to snag new one-year subscribers. I could be wrong, but that's definitely what happened last year. Alright, let's actually get to the breakdown, starting from the top with the must-plays. I'm sure you already know what I'm going to say, but Greedfall and Wasteland 3 make it to this spot. Greedfall, as mentioned, is a bit rough around the edges, but I'm willing to overlook that because the writing seems solid. Also, I really like the game's colonial era setting, which is something that I don't think is done too much. In a completely different RPG experience, there's Wasteland 3 that has a great turn-based combat and a game built around interesting lore if you're into the post-apocalyptic thing. Coming in for the strong recommendations this month are TOEM, and just scraping into this category is Backbone. TOEM is such a cute game with such a relaxing atmosphere that won't be for everyone, but I think many will like its charm, especially a younger audience. Backbone had a decent start, which is compelling me to delve deeper, but some lackluster writing gives me a bit of pause. Ultimately, I felt my time was enjoyed enough that I'd place it here rather than with the other games I didn't feel as strongly about. Which brings us to the week recommendations, which are Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, Blade Assault, and Super Magbot. Where the Water Tastes Like Wine has such an interesting concept with its story collection and retelling, but it ultimately just wasn't engaging enough for me. Blade Assault, while fun, felt like so many of the roguelites that came before, and I didn't feel it did anything interesting enough to set it apart from the many that I now have sitting in my Steam library. Finally, Super Magbot felt like a good, polished game, but it was a game that just wasn't for me. It makes its spot here because, truthfully, I did get a rush completing levels, but I know I won't be returning to it. And in the Don't Bother With section is First Class Trouble. You know, I actually feel kinda bad placing it here. It seemed like it could be a fun game, but with the barely hanging on player population, I can't see too many people finding fun with it other than people with the friends who would play this with them. Especially when I'm sure there are many more populated social deduction games out there. That wraps up my thoughts on this month's bundle. It definitely could have been better, but there's always next month, right? Do you agree with my thoughts? What games, if any, are you looking forward to playing? Let me know what your thoughts are, if there are any different recommendations you'd make in the comments below. I hope this video helped you in some small way, and if it did, then please consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, or whatever it is you feel like doing. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.